DMDongo here with another review from the DM's Guild. This time we're looking at Adventure Anthology Volume 2 by PB Publishing, on sale for $12.95. You've got demons, you've got devils, you've got dinos, and you've got a doll? Adventure Anthology Volume 2. What are you getting with this collection of adventures? Well, you're getting 6 adventures from 5 of the best DM's Guild authors on there. Phil Beckworth, Ashley Warren, Travis Legg, JVC Perry, and Chris Bissett. The adventures in specific are The Haunt 2, which is the sequel to The Haunt, Dinos of Darkness, which is a sequel to Struggle in Three-Horn Valley, Minotaur's Bane, which is the capstone adventure to the Minotaur quadrilogy, and Scourge of the Medusa's Curse, Bullet Storm, and Breaker of Chains. Each of those adventures stands on their own with no previous installments to go along with them. Now, it's not to say that you can't run The Haunt 2, Dinos of Darkness, or Minotaur's Bane without running their previous installment, but they become richer as a result of that. They become more impactful as a player if you've run, say, The Haunt, and you know the kind of, not the story behind the doll, but you've seen her before and she's annoyed you the first time. This time, she'll come back and really terrify you. Now, the 3 adventures I want to specifically focus on are The Haunt 2, Minotaur's Bane, and Scourge the Medusa's Curse. So let's start with The Haunt 2. The Haunt 2 is this, like I said before, a sequel to The Haunt, and it kind of carries that same themes and ideas on. It's a scary, terrifying adventure down in the depths of an abandoned asylum. You're looking for this doll, you know she's here somewhere, but you don't know how to destroy her and you can't seem to locate her. You've been sent in to deal with her. As you go through the adventure, you maybe run into her a few times, maybe you don't. But you find more and more information about her origins, where she came from, and how she became the evil little doll in question. And some players may find they grow a little bit of sympathy for her based on her ordeal. The other problem is you're not just fighting her, you're fighting everything in the asylum and the asylum itself. Things begin to change and shift as players move their way through the asylum, and it gets very, very creepy when things aren't where they were when you first went through, or when a set of staircases turns into a river of blood. Minotaur's Bane, on the other hand, is your more classic adventure around to fight off a demon invasion, I think is the best way of putting this. It is a really interesting idea, and it has a lot of different parts to it and different ways it kind of plays out. In the first, and it kind of has 3 main sections. In the first section, the demon invasion happens. You're dropped into the abyss, and you're presented with a large hex grid map and told, holy crap, the invasion is happening. You know these people, you know all of these NPCs, and you need to help them. And so you look around and you see the battlefield. You can't see very far because there's fighting everywhere, but you have to do something. So players are presented with a very strong exploration tier, and kind of they're supposed to look around for some way of helping out. As they look around, find different ways, find different people, or find maybe even different NPCs that they know about and have tried to save in previous adventures. If they haven't done those ones, it's going to be less impactful here. But eventually they make their way down and end up into a maze, from which they need to go even further deep down, beating the maze's guardian. And the maze itself is convoluted, confusing, and not always leads into the ways that they think it should. It's an interesting idea in terms of doors that always lead back on themselves. What I would want to do, I think, if I had more time, is cut the maze up in terms of pieces and use them in something like Roll20 or any virtual tabletop, Fantasy Grounds, for example, and be able to turn and twist them as the players went through, such that I could move their tokens around, cut them off from each other, and go, well, you're in this room now, and see if they can work out if they're oriented correctly. It's a rather interesting idea in terms of that kind of thing. Now, the next thing is that in the final area, you're in Baphomet's lair, because that's who you're trying to go deal with. Why? Who else would you be dealing with? It was a Minotaurs. If you had Minotaurs and you had a demon. It must be Baphomet, I mean, obviously. And you make your way down in there, and you're trying to find where he is, and trying to defeat him finally and prevent his incursion into the prime material plane. This is a really great adventure in terms of very high stakes, very good, like, capstone adventure. It's a nice finality to it, I think. Now, Scourge of Medusa's Curse is a standalone adventure. It's different in that there's a mystery to solve. Where the other two is like terrifying and you know what you're there to do, Scourge of the Medusa's Curse doesn't present you with that immediately right away in terms of as a player. You don't know exactly what you're looking for. You don't even know. The only premise you're given is that a wife has gone missing and she's wandered into the forest on her own. And there are rumors of a Medusa that have kind of plagued the area for hundreds of years, but nobody seems to know where she's come from, and she never seems to specifically attack the village. And that's what's kind of interesting here. You have these different types of adventures. Terrifying, demon invasion, and then you have mystery. And that's part of kind of the charm of this whole anthology. Now, the Scourge of the Medusa's Curse, you go into the forest, you find your way to the Medusa's lair, and then when you confront her, well, I'm not going to say a spoiler here, there's something interesting that happens as a result of the interactions with her. And the dungeon itself, the Medusa's lair, is really interesting in terms of the things that can occur, things like drowning mechanics that I haven't seen in a lot of, and other bits and pieces. It's really well done. All of the adventures are really well done. What did I like about this anthology? Well, there's a couple of things. I really like the adventures themselves. All 6 are really great. I know I focused on those 3, but I still love Dinos of Darkness, Breaker of Chains, and Bulletstorm. They're really great adventures. I focused on the 3 I did for some specific reasons that will become clear later. The other reason that I really like this is because the 6 adventures presented are very different from each other. There's not a kind of sense of sameness to them. For instance, The Haunt 2 is a very terrifying adventure where you're being hunted. That sense of tension and pressure is there on players. Whereas things like The Scourge of Medusa's Curse is your classic mystery. You don't know why you're going to look for this woman, but you only get the very vaguest sense that she's in danger. And then you've got a demon invasion on the other hand, which is like with a hex grid and some really interesting and different mechanics behind it. And all 6 kind of carry on different ideas and lean on one pillar or another. And I would say that Scourge of Medusa's Curse leans more on the role-playing side of things. The same thing with Haunt 2. It leads on both exploration and roleplay. Combat is very, very dangerous in the Haunt 2, depending on how clever your players are. Whereas combat in Minotaur's Bane is really, really strong, really interesting, really different, really varied. But roleplay is a little bit less because there's not as much. There's a very clear-cut answers to what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to kill demons. They're dangerous, evil creatures that are trying to invade your world. You need to stop them. And so the combat is very varied, very interesting, very different. A lot of weird stuff's happening. And I love that about that. There's a lot of difference and variance, and all the writing is really brilliant. I love that they included every single adventure includes maps that are really well done, gorgeous, well executed for the most part, and I'll get on to that in my next section. I also appreciate that there are handouts where available. For instance, the Haunt 2 includes some really nice handouts that you can give to your players when they come across certain items, and they're quite creepy and terrifying in their execution. Drawings like these there is always something very unsettling about a child's drawing depicting things of the horrific nature, and these hit that note very, very well. So kudos whoever did those. You really scare me. I'm not gonna lie. Now, what didn't I like about the Adventure Anthology? Well, there's only a couple of things, but I want to talk about the specifics in the Adventure Anthology as a whole, and then I want to talk about the things about specific adventures. So, let's start with as a whole. Firstly, I would love love to see a compass rose on every map just so they're more easier to orient based on things. Now, most of the time you're just going to stick it in the corner and north is going to be the top of the map and everything else will fit accordingly. I think in one of the cases the map isn't oriented that way, and I think it's oriented the way that looks the nicest, so it makes it a little difficult as a DM to figure out which way everything is kind of sitting and how to put the map on the table to figure things out. And remember, these things can sometimes end up on tables, and so the top of the map isn't exactly where you think it is. Any handouts, and this kind of specifically targets the Haunt too, it's one of the ones I noticed it most on. You should always include these handouts as separate files. There's some really great child drawings that are in that, but it would have been nice to have them as separate files because it makes it easier to integrate into virtual tabletops like Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds. As it is, I had to cut them out of the PDF, which isn't a big deal, but it does slow me down a little bit, whereas if they were just separate files, I would just drag them into the tooling. The other thing is that I'll mention is that the stat blocks for the various monsters across the anthology aren't consistent with each other. Now, they were all written at different times, different ideas were done in place, different ways of doing things, but it makes it hard to implement multiples of them in very quick succession. It's what I do primarily in terms of when I'm trying to do these things. I type them up, make sure everything's correct, and then I go back and double check, basically. And because I'm doing that, I do a lot of this by muscle memory because of how many I do. I've reviewed 50 total things from the DM's Guild, and a lot of those were adventures, so I'm very, very good, if things are consistent, at implementing monster stat blocks in terms of invert VTTs. However, if you put a condition immunity before a damage immunity or flip them, I will just carry raw and writing and very, very quickly. Even copy and pasting, I'll do it automatically almost. So having them consistent with each other is really important. Now, I want to talk about specific adventures. Now, I mentioned the thing about the Haunt too, about handouts not being in separate files. That is like a constant rule in general. In terms of the Minotaur's Bane, the final map is a lot of weirdness. I want to start with the start point. It's really hard to say where it is. A location 0 is listed in the key, but it doesn't seem to appear on the map anywhere, and I had to take a long time to figure out where it must have meant. Now, there's a spot on the map that's clearly a summoning sigil of some kind, but there's another one of these somewhere else in the map, and I kind of had to guess and say, well, I think that looks right based on the description and based on what's in there, so maybe that's where they start. And then I get a little weirder because it got hard to figure out why the numbering system was the way it was. You have locations like hallways, which are higher numbers than where they're going to or from. So there's a hallway near a treasure chamber that I think is number 12 or 11, and its subsequent chambers are lower than 9 and 7. And it doesn't seem to make any sense. And they're actually, when you look at them on the page, they're on separate pages. So it would have been nice to go hallway, treasure chamber, rather than treasure. I think it was hallway, a page later, treasure chamber on a, yeah. It was a little weird in terms of the numbering system. It would be nice to make kind of like, have a logical flow to it, as it were. Now, I know players can go anywhere, but having a golden path, for instance, really helps to figure out, well, I think if I was a player, this is what I would do, and this is the path I would take, and maybe I would go double back on myself later or something like that. But just to give an idea of, like, there didn't seem to be any, like, pattern that I could discern from this. I could be wrong, and I could be like, oh, if you look at this way, it will be perfectly obvious. And I'm like, oh, yeah. That is obvious, but I couldn't work that out. And this is the map that's specifically where I was trying to work out where things were. So the compass rose was kind of like, this one is direct at, but it's just generally a nice to have. It was very hard to work out which way the map was oriented. In one case, I figured out, I think that north was the left-hand side of the map if you oriented this way, and I'll have it up in the corner. However, in another case, it seemed that the map was actually oriented the other way, and north was at the top of the map in terms of where it is in the picture right now. So I'm a little confused on this one. The other thing I will mention as well, the Pale Knight's Chamber, which is in the top of the map right now, you'll see it with the hand. I don't think there's any access to it, as far as I can tell. But it's mentioned all over the place in terms of a thing you can do, and to advance the story, you don't need to go there, but it is helpful to go there, or at least it is a potential path for resolution. And it's possible you don't need to be in there, you don't need to go there, but it's weird that it's there and it doesn't explain how to get there. It's really strange in terms of that kind of thing. And those are the main things I didn't like. Now, for my final thoughts and my rating. So, the Adventure Anthology Volume 2 contains 6 adventures of varied ideas and varied kind of strengths and weaknesses in terms of their pillars. Everything overall I really love. I really love the variance of there. I love the different ideas presented. I love the writing in all of them. It's really well done, and you get a different experience depending on which adventure you choose. And I think DMs will find something that they really love. And at $12.95, you're getting a really, really good value here. It's about 200 pages of usable content. There's 5 of the DMs Guild greatest authors, 34 external maps, and about 50 to 60, and let's be honest, players always, in my case, always take longer than they should, and I'm thinking like 70 hours of gameplay here. So there's a really, really great value here, and it's basically about 50% cheaper than if you were to buy them each individually. So really, really good value. And really, really nice. And it's at $12.95. You can't really go wrong, even with the problems I mentioned in Minotaur's Bane. Now, I will say this for the Adventure Anthology Volume 2. As a whole, I really like it, but I think the problems in Minotaur's Bane and the lack of separate files for the Haunt 2 kind of, they don't sour the whole experience, because Minotaur's Bane is still a really great adventure. I think it just needs some improvements in the final map. Now, so for that reason, I'm going to knock off half a point and award it 4.5 stars out of 5. But thank you, and please do pick this up. Go get it. Go use it. Get it from the DMs Guild. Hopefully, PB Publishing will improve Minotaur's Bane, will fix those map issues, and I can easily award it 5 stars out of 5. All the adventures included are really great, and it does deserve those. It's just that final map that's kind of making me a little hesitant to give it a perfect score. So, please do go pick this up. Please remember to use my affiliate code, which is down below, and like, comment, and subscribe. Do you want me to do more Adventure Anthology? Do you want me to do less? Do you want me to do more different things? I'd love to know. Thank you. Peace out.